Welcome, Internet, to a psychoanalytic talk. And today I wanted to talk about a topic that I haven't seen much discussion around and I felt important to talk about. So I'm reading this book, which I'm going to review at some point, called Aggression in Personality Disorders and Perversion by Otto Kernberg. And in it, he makes a very interesting distinction between hysterical personality and histrionic personality disorder. And that's something I find very interesting because there's a lot of confusion and people mix up both of them, and I myself have used them interchangeably. So I wanted to take the time today to really make the distinction because I found it useful, so perhaps you can find it useful or the information can be helpful in a way or in another. So before we start, let me preface this by saying that neither hysterical personality or histrionic personality are insults. Here I'm really using them in the diagnostic way, meaning that it's a way of trying to understand someone, his mental processes, and the best way to help him or her, as we're going to see, because hysteria and histrionics are not just a women's affair, but everyone can have it. Men, women, people in between even. And basically that's something that's very important to keep in mind. It's not an insult, it's not what most people think of it when we say, oh well, she's hysterical. It's not shouting, screaming, it's not that. That's just not true. It's not what the diagnostic nor the mental processes are about. So with that in mind, and I will really ask you to keep it in mind, it's not an insult, and it's not the way we commonly use the words, that it's something else. I'm going to define, with the help of what I've learned through the book of Otto Kernberg, what is hysteric personality, both in men and women, and what is histrionic in both men and women. So let's get going. So first and foremost, what is hysterical personality? Well, for Otto Kernberg, it's on a spectrum, meaning these things are kind of linked, but they're absolutely not the same, they're not equivalent. And basically, hysterical personality in women manifests through a high emotional intensity, and basically they might show pseudo-hypersexualized behavior. Why pseudo? Because basically it's going to be linked with also a lot of sexual inhibition, for example, like frigidity or will to reject the other once they've seduced him or her. So the sexual promiscuity is not so frequent with them. It's much more distant than what people think. So there is that aspect where hysterical personalities will seduce, but not necessarily go to the extent of a sexual relationship or sexual promiscuity. That was hard to say. Anyway, basically these women, because here we're talking about the women's side, they're going to be in a way competitive, driven, but also in a way submissive. However, what I found very interesting, because Kernberg insists on it, that they're going to have good object relationships, meaning basically relationships with others are going to be pretty good, pretty adapted, and pretty well. They're going to be able to show loyalty, compassion, kindness, genuineness, love and care. All of those elements are part and parcel of the hysteric personality, which is not necessarily disordered, by the way. It's just a personality type. It's just that emotions are very high, and expression and dramatization are a bit of the common mechanisms of the relationships, meaning that they're gonna overemphasize certain sins or overact or overreact, always in a very, very colorful and maybe high way in terms of emotions. But they can also take a step back, meaning that these women with hysterical personalities, after a moment of crisis, can say, no, I've gone too far, I can admit that I faltered or that the relationship was not great, and they have the capacity to feel and tolerate guilt on a certain level. And there is a very good prognosis for these women in psychoanalysis, meaning that they can really find their desire, what they want, and how to deal with all of that. So psychoanalysis seems to be the method of choice for those women. So for the men, because we never talk enough about it, but hysterical personalities are also found in men, and with men they're going to be slightly different, but there's still going to be a lot of sins that are going to be correspondent. Well, first and foremost, men are going to exhibit a lot of being very virile or very effeminate. Both extremes exist within men with hysteric personalities. They're going to take the apparatus or of a male, quote-unquote, virile male or alpha male, as we would now say with our modern vocabulary, right? Or on the other side, an effeminate man with female traits. And basically they're going to have a very, I can say, use of sexuality that's marked by basically having sexual relationships, but also being a little immature, a little tantrumy with them, meaning that basically when they're not the first, they can feel vexed or hurt on their narcissistic level, meaning their self-image can be hurt and they can throw a little bit of a tantrum, but they still have the ability to be loyal and thorough and loving of others. It's just that they might feel very competitive and very high in emotion also, and having Don Juan-like, meaning having sexual relationships, but also not like linking them to true relationships, but more having a sexual consummation of others rather than just partners, so to speak. Basically, they are also very good. They have very good prognosis with psychoanalysis, meaning that psychoanalysis can truly help them find their desires. And something that I found very interesting, because in hysterical personalities, we often think that they are suggestible, that basically they're influenceable by their peers. It seems, according to what Kernburn states, is that it's not really true. They're not truly influenceable, except for people with whom they have an emotional bond. That they're going to be very influenceable, but for the rest, not so much. Not going to compromise on their desire if they don't really want to identify with someone else or with the desire of someone else, which is something I found very interesting reading the book. So basically, that's for hysteric personalities. Now for histrionic, which are, let's say, to put it mildly, it's the more extreme side of, let's say, the histrionic spectrum, right? So basically, these people, let's start with the females or women with a histrionic personality disorder. Well, there are women that are gonna sexualize, but it's going to be massive. It's going to be crude, meaning that there's going to be no play with sexuality. It's going to be in your face, kind of. Yeah, there you go. Kind of in your face, kind of direct, and basically, it's not going to be a subtle affair. It's going to be more of a massive affair, and also they're going to be more manipulative, much more unstable. Also, in terms of their image of themselves and of others. In a way, a simplified version would be to say that basically histrionic personality disorder is kind of close to borderline personality disorder, but with a whole range of seductiveness, attractiveness that's trying to be gained, and trying to manipulate others through sexual or attention-seeking behavior. And there is that point where basically at certain extremes they themselves manipulate others by threatening suicide or basically choosing men that are going to hurt them very, very thoroughly. Or even women, it's not just a gender thing, but partners that are going to hurt them, to really break them or to make them feel in a bad way or to degrade them, both sexually but also morally, meaning it's not just about the sex, it's also about how people will basically depreciate them, devalue them, belittle them. And basically, their choice of partners reflects an object choice that's much, much worse than the hysterical personalities, because basically they have an unstable relationship with the internalized object, meaning that in and of themselves, relationships with others are not easy and they always pose a threat or a risk. So therefore that risk transfers, without using the psychoanalytic term, but transfers into basically the relationship with others, meaning that it's incredibly difficult, complicated, and hard for them to really truly bond and connect. Psychoanalysis is the method of choice for histrionic personality disorders, but the outcome is not as good as hysterical personalities, because hysterical personalities might have mild sexual problems. Histrionics are really going to be object-related problems, meaning it's going to be the relationship that's really going to be at the core of the problems, meaning that that's going to be the main focus of the therapy, and how to deal with them, and of course all the innuendos and all the very subtle versions of therapies. I'm not sure you say innuendo in that context, but you understand what I mean. All the subtleties, all the nuances of psychotherapy, psychoanalytic psychotherapy. Anyway, so for male or men with histrionic personality disorders, well, they can be very charming, but also retain some form of manipulativeness, mainly basically trying to gain social advantages or benefits from others in a parasitic style, meaning that basically they might leash off others. They also seek attraction, people being attracted to them, and they try to make themselves attractive to others. And they also might be, I forgot that for the female or woman histrionic personality disorder, because that's common with both men and women of the histrionic category. Both have Pseudologia fantastica. Well, don't worry, I'm going to define it. I did not know what it meant either before looking it up. So basically, it's a lie that the person knows is a lie and presents it not necessarily to gain advantage over a situation or as a white lie to protect, let's say, someone else's narcissism or their narcissism. It's a way of inflating their own narcissism and to make themselves look grandiose. So they're going to lie on a scale where the clinician is going to see it's a blatant lie. And it's going to be something massive. For example, if I had to say, give an example of Pseudologia fantastica, I would say that a patient will come in and say that he's a very well-known pop star when it's objectively not true, and they know it's not true. And when you ask them, is it really true, they might cut it out and just pretend it never existed. So that's what it is, Pseudologia fantastica. And that's something that the histrionics might use overwhelmingly compared to the hystericals that are going to use it, but it's not going to be ongoing. In the case of histrionics, it is ongoing. It is continuous, and it's a way of gaining attention, gaining the looks of others. In a way, when others look at them, it's a way for them to feel reassured in their own identity and their own sense of being. However, it's always very fragile, because without the gaze of the other, they might feel suicidal or depressed, or even having very, very massive psychotic episodes, which they can come back from. That's not psychotic breakdown, right? It's just to have moments of psychosis where they might feel very persecuted or very delusional, but they can reach out and come back from them, and they can realize afterwards it was a psychotic episode brought about by a chain of events. Nevertheless, at the moment where they're experiencing it, it is a psychotic moment, and that's not to be toyed with. So that was also very interesting. And I feel that basically, if I were to sum up the ideas, is that basically hysteria and hysterical personalities are, in a way, forms of adaptations that are much less hard on the individual, meaning that they allow for the individual more, how can I say, more subtlety and more ease than histrionic. Histrionic seems to be more severe, more impactful both socially, mentally, and relationshiply for the person, whereas hysterical personalities seem to be doing fairly well, even though they might have sexual problems or ununderstanding problems or problems where the desire might be blocked off. They still seem to do better than histrionics, and histrionics seem to be at an emotional disadvantage. However, both can be helped by psychoanalysis, but not necessarily exactly in the same way. So I hope you found this video interesting, and I'll see you in the next one.